Today I will be discussing the CIA's involvement in the overthrow of Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran in 1953, the consequences of these actions, and their contribution to the Iranian Revolution of 1979. In its declassified report on the 1953 operation to overthrow Mossadegh, the CIA first used the term blowback. In the context of that report, blowback was used to describe the unintended consequences of our government's intervention into the internal affairs of other countries. Today in modern Iran, we see how some of this blowback has surfaced. Iran is one of 4 countries on the U.S. state sponsor of terror list, which is defined as a country determined to have repeatedly provided support for acts of international terrorism. The country's streets are often filled with anti-Western protesters shouting "Death to America," and the regime treats women as second-class citizens where they are not even permitted to watch men's sports. The United States criticizes Iran for its continued performance of bad deeds on the global stage and its lack of a democratically elected government. But how did things get to this point? This talk will address just that and provide an opinion that it was our nation that contributed to the country's anti-democratic government. From 1951 to 1953, Iran had a democratically elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh. Mossadegh was well liked by the Iranian people, was anti-Western, and was against foreign ties. He is considered the closest thing Iran has ever had to a democratic leader. In 1953, the Prime Minister made the decision to nationalize the country's oil industry. For decades, Iran's oil had been controlled by British and Americans, and Mossadegh saw a need for change. This move greatly upset the United Kingdom, and they began immediately working with the United States to develop a plan to overthrow Mossadegh and reinstall the Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who was a Western-friendly strongman and a brutal dictator. The first attempt to overthrow Mossadegh took place on August 15, 1953. However, it was a failure, and the CIA decided to send a cable to discontinue the efforts. Despite this order, Kermit Roosevelt, top CIA officer in Iran, ignored the cable, saying, "We're not done here." The next day, on August 19th, crowds that are believed to have been bought by the CIA took to the streets of Iran and succeeded in the coup. Mossadegh was jailed, and the Western-friendly Shah was reinstalled. So this made everything okay, right? Everyone was happy and oil control was back to normal, right? Actually, no. It was only the beginning of a long road ahead that would eventually result in the 1979 Iranian Revolution. As written on foreignpolicy.com, the coup fanned the flames of anti-Western sentiment, which reached a crescendo in 1979 with the U.S. hostage crisis, the final overthrow of the Shah, and the creation of the Islamic Republic. With the Shah's rule came forced Westernization. While this included many good things, such as expansion of women's rights and education, the Shah's rule also directly suppressed religion in Iran. All religious observation became subordinate to the state, the wearing of the traditional Muslim veil was banned, and Iran, by all appearances, was becoming Western. However, at the same time, a strong central government was formed, and any political oppositions to the Shah's policies was not tolerated and was dealt with by Savak, Iran's secret police. By 1975, the multi-party system of Iran was abolished, and power became more concentrated in the hands of the Shah. Corruption and bribery became rampant within the government. According to Britannica, outlets for political participation were minimal, and opposition parties were marginalized or outlawed. Social and political protest was often met with censorship, surveillance, or harassment, and illegal detention and torture were common. Support began to grow for Iranian revolutionary Khomeini. Khomeini continued to criticize the Shah and published materials against the regime, accusing him of irreligion and subservience to foreign powers. These materials were smuggled into Iran and distributed, further contributing to the pending revolution. Finally, things began to escalate in 1978. Students and young people continued to protest the Shah, and many were arrested or killed. This only fueled the revolution more, as martyrdom is seen as noble in Islam. Things began to escalate, martial law was imposed, and government forces began killing hundreds. In late 1978, Khomeini coordinated with others to demand the Shah's abdication. By February 11, 1979, the Shah and his family had taken a vacation but never returned to Iran. Soon after, the military declared neutrality. In the eyes of Iranians, a victory had been won, but certainly in the eyes of the United States, an ally had been lost. On April 1st, Khomeini declared Iran an Islamic Republic, and there was a forced return to social conservatism. The Family Protection Act, which provided rights to women in marriage, was declared void, and revolutionary bands patrolled the streets, enforcing Islamic dress codes and behavior. Political groups that were anti-revolutionary were suppressed. Things had come full circle in Iran. Under the Shah, wearing religious garb was illegal. Now, under the newly established republic, not wearing religious garb was illegal. Opposition to the government was not tolerated under the Shah, and now opposition to the revolution and the republic was not tolerated. Regimes had changed, but the underlying themes of loss of freedom and anti-Western sentiment remained constant. This anti-Westernism was further proved by the seizure of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and the taking of 66 American hostages. Brutality against the United States, the Iranian people, and the entire world has continued for the last 4 decades. As a state sponsor of terror, Iran provides funding, training, and equipment to terrorist groups, particularly Hezbollah. It has a history of terrorist attacks against the United States and other Western countries, including bombings, abductions, and hijackings. Clearly, within the last century, Iran has shifted from an ally of the United States to an archenemy. But how much of this blame can be placed solely on Iran? Was it not our government that was partially responsible for the overthrow of Mosaddegh and the installation of the Shah? Was it not the United States that continued to support the Shah's regime through nearly 3 decades of brutality, which contributed to strong anti-Western sentiment? Overall, is my personal conclusion that the United States bears at least some responsibility for the blowback of the 1953 coup of Mosaddegh, the decades of his dictatorship which spurred the 1979 revolution, and ultimately the establishment of Iran's Islamic Republic that continues to be a threat on the world stage. Without the United States' involvement in the forced reinstallation of the Shah in Iran, the blowback from these events would have been much less severe and perhaps even non-existent today. Thank you.